Hey guys, you're watching TechEdit. I'm Basil. This is the Vivo V40, this is the Vivo V40 Pro, and they are exciting phones. They both pack huge 5,500 milliamp batteries, 80-watt fast charging, and this is the first time the V series gets Zeiss co-engineering across not just the Pro, but also the regular as well. So Zeiss portrait mode, Zeiss photo processing, as well as the Aura light, which basically lets you control the color temperature so you can get super artistic and creative without needing to rely on a flash in darker scenes. And the phones have huge 6.78-inch displays with 4,500 nits peak brightness. So impressive. I'm going to talk about the differences as well, and there are some that you won't see on a spec sheet, for example storage speeds. So there's a lot of detail for this video. Keep watching for that, but before I dive into it, a quick shout out to our sponsor. If you're watching this video, there's a very good chance that you too are a techie, someone with a phone, a laptop, a tablet, maybe even a second phone. I know with my old VPN, every time I activated it on one device, I'd get kicked off another, and it was incredibly frustrating. But Surfshark supports unlimited devices, which for me is priceless because doing what I do, I change my phone every few days. Now, I need a VPN because I travel a lot with work. I'm always on public Wi-Fi networks, and I want to keep my IP address and browsing data private. Plus, with 24/7 support and a 30-day money-back guarantee, you're only going to be committing to Surfshark if you like the service. And when you do come to sign up, if you use the code TechEdit, you can get 4 months free on a 12 or 24-month plan. All the details in the description below. Back to the V40 and V40 Pro, and I'm going to start by talking about competition. What are these phones' key competition? They've just launched in India. Usually Vivo launches a product in one market and then rolls it out further, so we should be seeing these in other markets very soon. But in India right now, the 12GB, 256GB OnePlus Nord 4 is priced similarly to the V40. OnePlus wins instantly out of the gate when it comes to power, for example, as well as charging speed, 100 watts versus 80 watts on the V40. But Vivo wins with our camera, 4K video recording across all cameras, and that ultra-wide camera spec, 50 megapixels versus 8 megapixels on the Nord 4. So that's really where I see the key competition for the 40. But the V40 Pro has a little bit more competition from a wider range of players. The Google Pixel 8a, for example, the Honor 200 Pro, and the Oppo Reno 12 Pro. It's quite exciting in this space. So what do these phones offer versus one another? For starters, I'll talk about what's the same with these two phones, and the design is virtually identical. In the box of the phones, you get a charger with the V40 Pro, no charger with the V40, though you do get a case, cable, etc. with all the phones. They do have a pre-fitted screen protector as well, and they're IP68 water and dust resistant, which is really great going for the price. They both weigh roughly the same, 190 grams for the V40 and 192 for the V40 Pro, and they're available in the same colors, but the V40 is available in a couple extra, namely Nebula Purple, which is the version I've got, and Sunglow Peach, with both phones being available in blue, Moonlight White, and Stellar Silver, which is the Pro version I have. I said they were thin at 7.58 millimeters, and because of the curved screen and curved back, the sides tapering in, it all makes them feel even slimmer. You have a plastic frame, though the matte plastic frame doesn't feel cheap, it feels really solid, and the glass back is very fingerprint resistant, matte finish. The silver version I've got has a more diffused finish, whereas the purple version has a bit more of a luster to it, but I do really like the design of both. They're not pushing any design boundaries, but they definitely feel like safe bets on first impression. And like I said, I'm really stoked they both get IP68 water resistance. They both have SIM card slots at the bottom as well as USB ports, and dual speakers for the first time on V series phones. On top of that, the right side's where you'll get the volume and power buttons, and around the back you've got that Aura light as well as a camera setup, a triple camera setup on the Pro and a dual camera on the Vivo V40. After a few days out and about with both of these phones, I'm so impressed by the screens. I know not everybody loves a curved screen, but these 6.8 6.78-inch AMOLED panels look pretty glorious. Like I said, they have a peak brightness of 4,500 nits when playing back HDR content, and yes, both phones support Netflix HDR out of the box at up to full HD resolution, which is excellent, and Netflix HDR10 to be precise. What's more, they have a peak high brightness mode brightness of 1200 nits, significantly lower, but still makes for very comfortable viewing outdoors. And with 1.5K resolution displays over 450 pixels per inch, they're beautifully crisp as well. So all in all, for these two phones at the price, it is a bit of a home run whichever you go for from Vivo. Another identical feature is battery capacity, 5,500 milliamps across both, which is huge, same as the OnePlus Nord 4 and OnePlus 12R, for example. With 80-watt charging though, slightly slower. If you're wondering about speeds, I was able to get a 50% charge with the Pro in half an hour. So like I said, it is slower. In that kind of time, I almost pretty much got a full charge with the Nord 4. But still, that's very respectable. Though do bear in mind, neither phone has wireless charging, so if you do want that in a similar package, you want to be looking at something like the Honor 200 Pro. They also have the same selfie camera on the front, a Samsung JN1 sensor, which is 1/2.76 inches, which is actually pretty respectable for a selfie camera, and both have autofocus, f2 aperture. In my early impressions with this, selfies were really solid across both. Now on to the differences to help you decide between these two. And if you like gaming, the Vivo V40 Pro is definitely the better choice. It has a Dimensity 9200 Plus chipset, a gaming phone chip from last year, and it performs so well in my tests. I played Wuthering Waves for a good while on it at max graphic settings, and it did not crumble, which I was impressed with. By contrast, the V40 has a Snapdragon 7 Gen 3, which certainly isn't flagship grade, but it won't have any issues getting you through day-to-day tasks smoothly. The Pro also has faster storage and RAM based on my testing. LPDDR5X RAM and UFS 4.0 storage versus what looks like UFS 3.1 storage and LPDDR4X RAM. So instantly you're going to maybe get some day-to-day smoothness differences between the two, but the longer you use the phone, the Pro is just that little bit more future-proofed. Vivo also gives you a 50-month fluency promise with the V40 and V40 Pro. Now this sounds similar to the OnePlus guarantee that it partnered with Tuve to get that third-party certification for 6 years of smooth performance. And that sounds a little bit more believable because Vivo's tests are done internally and it's for slightly less time. Though I will say the specs do read well and they should give you a decent performance for a good few years, especially the Pro. As far as RAM goes, both are available with either 8 or 12 gigabytes. You can pick up the Vivo V40 in 128, 256 or 512 gig options, the V40 Pro only in 256 and 512. In the real world, where the V40 Pro does really shine is gaming, and yes, the camera does edge ahead. I'll dive into some photo samples in a sec, but let's start off with some benchmarks. The V40 Pro scored 4005 Wildlife Extreme Stress Test peak score and bottomed out at 1917, and that's versus a pretty consistent 1490 odd score on the V40. Though I did find after those benchmarks, the Pro did generate some more heat, so that's worth noting. It's a similar story with Geekbench, with the Pro single core score of 2028 and multi-core 5199, absolutely smacking the V40, which scored 1153 single core and 3126 multi-core. Still super respectable day-to-day use, but for intensive tasks, you're going to want the Pro. If you look at the top level specs, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Pro and the regular V40 have the same main camera, but actually that's not the case. Vivo calls them both Zeiss OIS main cameras, but the V40 Pro gets a Sony sensor versus a Samsung sensor on the main camera on the V40. But just like the selfie camera, the ultra wides across both of these phones are the same. Samsung JN1 sensor, just like the selfie camera, 1/2.76 inches with autofocus, so can capture macro photography as well. They both have a 15mm angle of view and a nice wide f2.0 aperture, so for the price are amongst the best ultra-wide cameras available. Onto the main cameras, and the V40 gets a Samsung GNJ sensor, 1/1.57 inches, so still nice and big, but being a Samsung sensor, it's probably a little bit cheaper to buy. This is paired with an f1.88 lens, 24mm angle of view, and just like the name suggests, has OIS to keep everything nice and still. Meanwhile, the V40 Pro gets a Sony IMX921 sensor, also an f1.88 aperture, an ever so slightly wider 23mm angle of view, OIS obviously, and it's actually basically the same size, 1/1.56 inches. As for the telephoto camera on the Pro, it's the same sensor setup found on the V30 Pro last year, an IMX816, which is 1/2.51 inches, relatively modest sized, no OIS by the looks of things, but still should help you punch in closer to subjects, especially in good light. It's also got a really nice wide f1.8 aperture as well, and that 50mm focal length, roughly 2x zoom. I already said the V40 can shoot 4K video across all its cameras, but that's capped at 30 frames per second, whereas the V40 Pro can capture 4K 60 across all of its cameras, putting it in line with more flagship grade options. The Zeiss features across both phones are very similar. You get Zeiss natural processing, which is where you're going to notice it the most day to day, but there's also that Zeiss portrait mode. With the V40 Pro, you get a couple of extra digital lenses so you can punch in a bit further with that portrait mode active. And there's Zeiss movie mode as well, so you can get some cinematic bokeh effects while capturing video. Comparing pictures across both of these phones, and they are very good, both of them at their positioning. I will say I did prefer the quality from the Pro's main camera. It just got a little bit more clarity from that Sony sensor versus the Samsung sensor, and also the detail fall off from the subject into the background just looked a little bit more natural and nuanced. Interestingly, the zooms are very comparable in certain scenes. When the light's low, the V40 Pro defaults to the primary camera for zoom, not actually using that telephoto camera. And in those instances, they're very, very similar, but in good lighting, the Pro's zoom edges ahead, it's more natural. You can see it relies a lot less on AI to recomposite the image than the V40. The V40 is very respectable, definitely beats out the OnePlus Nord Nothing Phone 2a Plus, but the V40 Pro definitely edges ahead across both the primary and the zoom cameras. As a result, with that very similar camera interface, ultra wide selfie camera, and the Aura lighting experience, if those are your key concerns, you'll be well suited with either phone. But if you do want that 4K 60, or you want slightly better primary camera, telephoto reach, extra clarity there with that zoom, then the Pro is for you. And like I said, if you're a gamer, definitely that's the case. But if all you want is a really, really good feeling design that looks great and has a fantastic screen with excellent battery life, the V40 will give you all of those things. So hopefully you enjoyed this comparison between these two phones. If you did, click that thumbs up button. Please do subscribe to the channel to stay on top of everything that I do. Hopefully next year we'll get a V40 with maybe a periscope camera. Until then, I've been Basil with TechEdit. Thanks for watching.